This is Center Stage, putting your firm in the spotlight by highlighting business owners and other industry experts to help take your firm to the next level. Hey everyone, and welcome to Center Stage. I'm your host, John Henson, and this week, talking about what you can do to really build and execute and how you can execute on your business goals. And I mean, I'm sure as business owners, you're already setting goals, you already have things planned out, maybe you're even milestoning them. But I wanted to dig a little bit deeper and just kind of get some insight on how you can really go the extra mile and set yourself up for success. And so to do that, I am joined by a coach, a strategist. He does so many different things with law firms, and that is Moshe Amsel. Moshe, thank you for joining us this week.
Thank you, John, for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity to be able to share with your audience, and hopefully we'll bring some value to them and help boost your show in the process. I love podcasting. I started listening to podcasts back when you needed to download them from the iTunes library onto your iPod. I've been hooked since, and it's been a great source for me to go for information. So I love being on the other side of it and being the provider of the information. So I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. So before we jump in, I mean, I see you all over the place. I know that we have connected quite a bit in the past, but for people out there who may not be familiar with you, how did you kind of get to where you are right now? Why are you passionate about, helping law firms grow? And just kind of give us a quick little recap of how you got here.
Absolutely. There is no quick way to recap, the years and the journey that I've been on. But honestly, like helping law firm owners that's my third career. So I spent 20 years in the IT industry. During that time, I went through a divorce. And while I went through the divorce, I decided to go and become a paramedic. And I took a little detour from the IT industry, worked full-time as a paramedic for a few years, went back, and I still am a paramedic. I do it. It's now a hobby, passion of mine. I work 1-2 nights a week, and I go help the community there. But when I was full-time as a paramedic, I was sitting in the medic station and I was, waiting for the 911 calls to drop. And I would notice that what everyone else was doing was sitting there watching TV. And I said, I can be more productive during this time. So I decided to really evaluate what I wanted in life and what I wanted to be known for. And I realized that I didn't want to be known for fixing somebody's server in the middle of the night after it was ransomware hacked, right? I wanted to be known for something more. And I realized that there was a massive impact that I had received from my grandfather. So my grandfather came from Nazi Germany, just him and his father. He was 11 years old. And ultimately, long story short, they started a business. He ended up partnering with some cousins and bought an apartment building on the west side of Manhattan. And that apartment building, needless to say, went up in value tremendously, started to sell off the individual units as co-ops. And that cash that he received from that, he turned around and helped all 36 of his grandchildren to get the down payment for their first home purchase. And being on the recipient side of that, as a first-time home buyer, young couple, young family, that was a massive help. Like, people spend a decade saving for their first time home purchase, and to be able to just be handed that as a gift and get a start on life that way was massive. And it really made an impact on me. And I said, what if I can help people do that for their grandchildren? What if I can help people create some sort of generational wealth that it's more than just about living their best life, but it's about creating a better future for the future generations. And I love the idea. I said, this is what I want to do. Now, how do I go about it doing it? And I had been a manager in business. I had run the departments. I'd been a director of IT. And I said, I think that the best way of creating wealth is to have a business that creates free cash flow. You then take the cash, invest in other places, and now you've got something going. So I want to help people with making their businesses better. I went to school to get better at business, because what's the one area of business that I really didn't have experience with? It was the accounting side. So I decided to major in accounting, ultimately decided to open my own accounting firm. And that's where things got interesting, because when you open professional services, you got to be catering to somebody. Who was I going to serve? So I started off actually in the online marketplace. But I didn't really have a compelling reason why somebody should work with me as opposed to any other accounting firm. And that's when I got turned on to Profit First, a book by Mike Michalowicz that is the antithesis to accounting. There's accountants that hate it and think that it's absolute trash, but the reality is that it really marries human nature to good financial practices. And I said, this is something I can get behind. And if it's taking off, maybe that's going to help me grow my firm. So I became a Profit First professional. And through Profit First headquarters, I got a lead. And that lead was a law firm in Manhattan. That law firm in Manhattan became my first legal client, who ultimately ended up referring me to another. And before I knew it, I had 6 law firms as accounting clients. Most of them were specifically to help them implement Profit First in their business. And what was interesting is that out of 6 specimens that came through my door, all 6 of them had the same exact problem. They all had really nice office, staff, cases coming through the door. And yet each one of them was moving money in and out of the business at payroll time to be able to cover payroll. And to me, that was enlightening. That was like, whoa, wait a second. Here's what looks like a successful business model, and yet they don't have enough cash to cover payroll every payroll cycle. How is this possible? So I made it my mission to dive into law firms and figure out what is going on here. Why are they so bad at running a business in a healthy way? And how can I help and fix that? And that has been the journey that I've been on for the last about 3 years now in helping law firms. And it's definitely taken its turns. And most recently, I've developed a brand new formula for law firm growth. That's been something that's been created over time by analyzing many, many businesses, helping them work through their issues, coaching them, and really understanding where it is that they're going wrong.
Wow. Yeah, I know we use the Profit First model here at Spotlight Branding. And I mean, I can see a very clear difference from the time before we were using it to now. And it really does make a lot of difference. So I highly recommend, checking out that book as well. So let's, we're talking about overall business goals and everything. And so, just kind of broadly speaking, and especially in just how you work with law firms, what are some of the various types of business goals that you think specifically law firms should be setting for themselves?
Yeah, so it's a very good question. And I think that the first thing that we need to understand is there's a step before the goal planning process, right?
Mhm.
Before I set goals, I need to create the vision. So goals are a very short-term, short-sighted focus, right? Goals are something, I'm going to have a goal for the quarter. I'm going to have a goal for the year. I'm going to have a goal for 18 months. You don't really set goals for 5 years. And the problem is that if you don't know what your 5 or 10-year vision is for the law firm or whatever business that you're running, if it's an accounting firm, but this really works for anybody. If you don't know what your long-term vision is, then it becomes very difficult to set appropriate goals for the short term. So the very first step before goal setting is the visioning process. And in the visioning process, you really have to ask yourself the kinds of questions of like, what do I want to be known for? What am I passionate about? What is the, when I die, what should be written on my headstone? Like, what's the eulogy that they're going to say at my funeral? And when you start asking those kinds of questions and working backwards, there's this age-old saying, begin with the end in mind. I think Stephen Covey's the one that said that, right? That works in life too, right? You got to begin with the end in mind. What is the end result? The end result is I pass and I leave a legacy. What is that legacy? Now let's step backwards and see, how does my firm fit into that legacy? How do I now create that in the long-term vision? And it's so important because there's so many different ways to run a business, right? You can decide that I want to be solo. I want to just be, I'm going to be the only attorney. Yeah, I might hire some people, but I'm going to maximize what I can be valued at. Well, if that's what you want in your long-term vision, it wouldn't make sense for you to have a goal to hire 2 attorneys by the end of the year. And that's really where when you're clear on what the vision is, it helps you figure out what direction you're going. A better example than solo, because that might be obvious, right? Somebody knows, oh, I just want to be me. But there's a difference between wanting to be a 20-person operation versus wanting to be as big as you can get and compete with the biggest law firms in the country, right? You're going to take very different levels of risk, action items, depending on which one you're heading towards. If you're heading towards a 20-person operation, you're going to move into that slowly. If that's where you're going to be 5 years from now, you only need to hire 2 people this year to be well on your way to get there. And next year you hire 3 or 4 people. And the year after that, you hire 5. And all of a sudden, 5 years later, you got 20 people, right? So understanding that long-term vision is really, really paramount to being able to identify the right plan for where you are today and what the next step is.
Yeah. Side note, do you use EOS either, with the way you consult law firms or just how you run your businesses?
You got the book Traction right over my right shoulder here behind us on the shelf. When I get a new coaching client, we send them a welcome package, and that welcome package contains 4 books. The first book is Living Forward by Michael Hyatt and Daniel Harkavy. Living Forward is basically a book about planning your life. And one of the most powerful exercises in that book is one that I mentioned, just in passing, and that is to write your own eulogy. But basically, that book really helps you identify what is important in all the different domains in your life, so that you're not sacrificing one to get the other. So I think that's a very important thing for somebody to get clear on when they're on this journey, to make sure that you don't spend 20 years and end up at the wrong destination. I mean, it would really suck. You get in the car and you put into your GPS, Florida, and you start driving, but you didn't realize that it put in Florida, New York instead of Florida, the state. And all of a sudden you're in the middle of winter instead of being on the beach, right? And that's really what we want to avoid when we're going on this journey, is we don't want to get there and find out we ended up at the wrong destination. So Living Forward is the first one. The second one is Traction, which is Gino Wickman's book that introduces the EOS system. It is not an easy read. It's not a fun read. You kind of need to slog through it. But when you do, he introduces some really, really good concepts that can help you structure an organization in a way that is really, really fueled for growth, avoids a lot of mistakes along the way. I'm a big fan of the EOS system, and there's a lot of components of EOS in the coaching that I do. Then I give Profit First. Clearly, we covered that already. And the fourth book that I give is a planner that we've identified as our own, but it's really based off of a planner called the 90X Action Planner. And you can get it at 90xgoalplanner.com or 90xgoals.com. I forget what the URL is. But it's basically a planner that's focused on the goal setting and execution process. And somebody should never have more than 2 to 3 major projects they're working on in a 90-day period. So essentially, this action planner has, on every page, it has 3 main action items that you have to do for the day. And then it's got the rest of your to-do list, the rest of your open items. And the idea behind it is that when you do goal setting, which we really didn't answer how I do goal setting, but when you do goal setting and you then turn that into projects that you're going to do quarterly, you then break those projects down into bite-sized pieces so that every week you have identified specifically the actions you need to do that week that are going to move the needle forward on each project. And then when you start your day, your focus is, how do I get these items done without getting to the end of the day saying, oh, I'll do it later, and then realizing now I need to do it tomorrow, because that's really what derails somebody from achieving a goal. It's not that they didn't set the goal properly, it's that they didn't take the action on the goal in order to achieve it. So those are the 4 things that I give, and that really encapsulates the style of coaching that I have, which is, we need to get really clear on your vision. We need to set your goals. Then we need to create an action plan of execution that's really specific, so that every day you know what needs to be done. The biggest thing that's going to derail somebody from moving forward is indecision. And it shows up in everything that we do. If you have 30 minutes right now What are you going to spend those 30 minutes on? Most people are going to spend 20 minutes trying to figure out what to do, and then 10 minutes trying to get it done. They're not going to finish. It's going to become another thing for their to-do list. What if you actually had a list already created with everything prioritized, and now you have a 30-minute block and you simply grab something from the list, you do it, you're done, right? So that's the epitome of efficiency happens when you're very, very clear on where your priorities are.
Yeah. And I can't agree more. I mean, because we also use EOS here in the office. And so, you used a couple of those keywords, vision, specifically that's what tipped me off to that. But then, yeah, just the idea of, figuring out how to be more efficient, because I know lawyers specifically just never seem to have enough time during the day. And so just, focusing on that, whether it's in terms of setting business goals or even just organizing their day-to-day tasks, I think is really important. So it's a really good resource to include in there. So let's back up here, because I know, you mentioned that, still kind of talking about, overall setting goals and how, how to do that. What mistakes have you seen most often that law firm owners are making that are often ending up preventing them from achieving those goals that they are setting?
Okay, so the biggest mistake is not setting a goal in the first place. It seems obvious, but probably 90% are not doing it, if not more. I mean, that's the real reason why it takes a lawyer 20 years to become a successful lawyer, right? Like they slodge along and they're like, I'm going through the motions. What are the motions that they're going through? Word of mouth advertising and taking what comes and then turning everything else away because they're busy, and then wait, and then they get not busy, and then they're waiting for things to come. And that's essentially the cycle that they're in. So eventually enough word of mouth is happening that creates enough leads that are coming in that they see enough reason to bring another person on. Everything is reactionary to the environment around them rather than being purposeful and with an intention of where they want to go. And that's the typical model that's used, not because it's the right model, not because it's being taught, but because they don't know any better.
Well,
right?
Yeah, they're not taught how to run a
most,
business in law school.
most attorneys will tell you that. Most attorneys will say they don't teach running a business in law school. And honestly, like that is if there was ever an excuse that somebody could hide behind, that's the one, right? And the reality is that if my kid gave me an excuse like that, I'd slap them in the face and say, come on, let's go. I mean, I don't hit my kids. Okay. That's not my parenting style, but you understand what I'm trying to say. Like, that is the stupidest thing to be hiding behind if you really think about it. Like, I went to school for an MBA. I have an MBA. I have a master's in business, right? What does that mean? They taught me how to do, cost accounting management. They taught me how to do inventory management. They taught me all the things that I will never have to do. I learned in business school. When it came to running my own business, when it came to teaching other people how to run their small business, there was pretty much zero that I learned in business school that was translatable to the real world. So stop hiding behind that and instead dive into the resources that are available to you. There's a ton of free resources out there. There are books, there are events you can go to. There are people who have done it before you that are sharing information about how they did it. Now, not everybody's system is going to work for you. Not everybody's way of doing it is going to work for you, but you have to understand that if you want to be successful, you have to believe you can be successful. You have to stop having excuses and figure out, how am I going to get this done? And that's what's going to really move the needle. So yes, most people are not setting goals, and goals is really where it starts. So in my framework has three main components: plan, grow, and scale. And the plan is the very first step. You have to plan what you want to do so that you can actually do it. And wouldn't you rather make mistakes on paper than make them for real? Like, Isn't that a better option? So what's crazy is that when I get coaching clients in the door in the beginning, the very first thing we focus on is the vision, and then we go straight into planning. So when they go into the planning, we start to work out the numbers, right? Okay, you want to have this result, and it's going to take X number of clients based on the way you price your services. So you need to get this number of clients to do it. In order to get this number of clients, you have to have this marketing strategy, which is going to cost you X, Y, Z. In order to serve this number of clients, you have to add this number of staff members. So now when we take the revenue that you bring in for this, and we look at these basic expenses, all of a sudden, you're not making any money. So how does this work? So what's crazy is that they're finding is that whatever they were doing already, it doesn't even work, because when you start to do the math, it's a broken model. So if the goal is to get you to like 30-40% profitability, we got to start figuring out how to do that on paper before we execute and make it happen. So planning is really, really important, and setting goals, which, it seems to be where you want to focus, is one small piece of the planning stage, right? So let's go into goal setting real quick. I like to, like Stephen Covey said, begin with the end in mind. So what is the financial number you want to be at 12 months from now? And when I say financial number, the big mistake that people make is they focus on revenue. And it is not revenue. If you're focusing on revenue, you're going to be like every other law firm that became my client and was doing 2 million in revenue and spending 2 million in expenses. The revenue number is irrelevant. I mean, it's relevant because if you have a revenue of 0, you cannot make a profit, right? But it's not relevant as a goal metric, because as a starting goal metric, you'll see we are actually going to use it as a goal metric, but most people focus on the revenue, and it's a willy-nilly choice. Like, oh, I want to be at $1 million. I want to be at 500,000 because it sounds good, because it's more than I'm at today, because it's not too big of a jump. I challenge you instead to focus on what you want to create for yourself personally. What is the take-home pay you want? What is the profit that you want? What number is going to impact your life in a way that you're going to be like, wow, this was worth the effort for the last 12 months? Get that number first, and then use profit first to figure out what your revenue needs to be in a healthy model at that take-home pay for you to have your target for your revenue. And that's essentially what I did. Was I created this table where there's a math calculation that they simply take their take-home pay, divide it by this factor, and it gives them the revenue to target. So now in this process, by focusing on profit, we now have a revenue target that we're going to aim for. Now, the number goal, the interesting thing to focus on when you're looking at goals is a lot of people focus on a goal. It's not in their control, right? Guess what? That revenue number is actually not in your control. You have 0 control over hitting that number or not. And I'll get pushback. People go, no, I have control. No, you don't, because you can't compel somebody to pay you. They have to decide to pay you. So the only thing you have control of is the actions you take to facilitate the sale. The actual numbers are not in your control. It's the actions that you take that are in your control. So what happens is when we create a goal and we're looking at that goal, we're saying, this is my target. The next step is I need to identify what are the actions that I need to take that are going to create that target. What are the actions that if I take these actions, I can act on faith and hope that that number gets hit. If I don't hit that number, it doesn't mean I failed. If I didn't take the actions I defined, that means I failed. You can never judge your success based on hitting the metric. You can only base your success on the yes or no. Did I take this action? Did I not take this action? So the planning process starts with a number that we're aiming for, but the very next step is to then work backwards from that number to create the right actions that you need to take to hit that number. And that's where the real work happens, because what are those actions? I don't know. We got to dive into that.
Yeah. And EOS specifically, does a really good job of kind of breaking this down, because, you have your yearly goals, but then, so like, let's say, all right, you want to have 25% profit. And then, so now it's like, all right, well, what do you have to do in order to get 25% profit? Well, I need to get 30 cases in each quarter. All right, well, that's fine. How do you get 30? What do you have to do to get 30 cases in a quarter? Okay, so now then you have those conversations about, all right, well, we should do this in marketing, or we should explore how much we're actually charging for those cases, and come up with stuff like that. And so that it's a really good system overall to help, kind of drill down even farther than I think people would instinctively go, especially people who aren't really familiar with running a business. Because I think if you don't have that experience, you just think, okay, well, my goal this year is 25% profit. Let's just, kind of go do it. But EOS then obviously helps you drill down and really figure out what actionable items that needs to be done. So let's talk about.
Before you ask the next question, you mentioned something that I wanted to hone in on, and this is really the linchpin of a lot of the planning process. You backhandedly mentioned that one of the things you can do is you can alter how much you're charging for something. And in the law firm growth formula, we position that piece, pricing your services, as a crossover between planning and growing. And this is what's crazy is that there's so much emotional attachment that people have around how much they charge. And I would say that and this is not a scientific number. I haven't done a study, but I would say that 95% of businesses are not charging enough, right?
Yeah.
Because you arrived at that price from some place where you felt comfortable with, and then you just kept going from there. We don't generally do a fresh restart on how we price our services and say, is there a better way? And I recently produced a podcast episode. So I'm a podcast host at Profit with Law. And I did a KPI episode on what are some and I started a KPI series. But one of the things that I had was the KPI that I dubbed or termed the average client value. And too many law firms focus on an hourly rate. And a lot of them are starting to recognize and adopt this idea of maybe an alternative fee arrangement, like flat fee pricing or value-based pricing or a subscription model, which are all great. And I think that that's part of the holistic picture of being able to unlock the value that you can have. But if we look at our average client value, if we look at the total number of clients served and the amount of revenue collected, and we divide the revenue collected by the client served, we have an average number. That is a number that we should now focus on and say, how do I get my average client from being worth $2,500 to being worth $4,000, to being worth $6,000, $7,000? Because everything else that you're doing, the marketing effort, the work that you're doing to serve them, it doesn't change.
Yeah. It's
simply the value proposition you're creating to the client to say, this service I'm providing to you is worth more than what I was charging yesterday. Yeah. And a lot of people have resistance around hourly. So that's what's holding them back. Because if you're at an hourly rate, and let's say you're charging $300 an hour, and you know that 3 attorneys down the street are all at $300, $325, $275, you feel like you have a cap. I can't charge $350 because nobody else is charging $350. Nobody's going to come to me. We can talk about how false that is. But what if instead of charging by the hour, you now said, okay, I'm going to charge $4,000 for this engagement. Now people can't compare you to the guy down the street because it's apples and oranges. As a matter of fact, with the person down the street, after 11 hours or 12 hours, you're cheaper. And there's no knowing whether the person down the street is going to take 20 hours to do it. Yeah. So all of a sudden, the value that you're creating by giving that flat fee is worth more than the translation to the hourly work being done. And then the beautiful thing is that once you start billing in a way that's not tied to your time, all of a sudden you unlock potential to now have somebody else do your work that you couldn't do before, because not everything you're doing has to be done by a lawyer. So by focusing on the average client value, we can change our pricing structure to be more aligned with what we want to create long term. What is the profitability we want to create? And honestly, so many business owners think that if I want to make more money, I have to get more clients, and that couldn't be further from the truth. Because more than likely, if you have a business that's already running and it's simply a broken business model, you're just not getting enough profit, more than likely the answer is changing your price, not trying to get more clients, add more people. Because I'll give you a drastic example to really drive this point home. If you're bringing in $2 million in revenue and you're paying $3 million in expenses, would you try to figure out how you could bring in 4 or 5 million in revenue? No, because you're losing $1 million. So if you double or triple it, you'll lose 2 or 3 million.
Right. And also,
Right?
you know, typically people who bring in more money, those expenses still keep piling up. So
Right,
you're still
exactly.
still not fixing the problem.
You're taking a broken model and you're saying, let me put more fuel on the fire. Right. I mean, it's great if it's a fire pit in your backyard, but if it's your house that's burning, you don't want to put more fuel on the fire. Right. So, but that's what people do is like, oh, let me just get bigger. Bigger is not the answer unless you've proven that you can run at a 20, 30, 40% profit margin. And now you want to get bigger. Great. Let's scale this baby. Right. But the reality is that most firm owners, most business owners are not there. Most business owners are at the point where they have a business that looks really good from the outside. You got a landscaper, you see his trucks on every street, but you don't know what's going on behind the scenes. Why are his trucks on every street? Is it because he's the Walmart? Is it because he's charging too little and therefore he's not making any money? Right. So you look at your business and you say, well, what if I don't try to be the Walmart? What if I don't even try to look at the competition, but instead I look at my customer and I say, what do they want? And how can I charge enough that I can serve them and not have to work 60 to 80 hours and not have to be looking at my bank account and be wondering where the next dollar is going to come from. And that is the true game of business. That is really where businesses are created. And it all starts with pricing your services.
Yeah. And we talk about this, with our whole audience, and just what we do in marketing and, the content that you're creating, positioning yourself as the expert, helping people see your expert status and ultimately helping you justify the rates that you charge. But at the end of the day, it's still your final decision what you're charging. Like your marketing company or however good your marketing is can't make you change your rates. You still have to make that choice. But there is still just a really good ecosystem there where there's a really good relationship with everything that you do and being able to charge those premium rates. And, and look, I think a big fear that a lot of business owners have, at least initially, is, well, God, if I increase my rates, that means that some people won't hire me because I'm too expensive. But at the end of the day, you have an opportunity if you increase your rate, like let's say you double your rates, but then you lose 50%
and you get 50% less sales.
Right.
50% less sales, right? That's the problem. The problem is that people are not doing the math, right? Because what we did is we just gave you a scenario where you're making exactly the same amount of revenue.
Right.
However, when you start to dig deeper, you're making the same amount of revenue serving 50% less clients, which means you're putting in 50% less effort to make that revenue. And now when you translate that into expenses to serve the client, you're making 50% more profit. So it actually ends up being more because you probably were at 0 profit before, and now you're at a 50% profit margin. So you're making 100% profit, right? Of what you were before. But the reality is it's more than that, right? It's more than just the flipping the script on the financial math of it. It's also, you're not going to get 50% no's now.
Yeah.
Right. We have this, that one of the hallmarks of fear is that we create a future outcome that hasn't happened yet. And then because of that future outcome we created, we stop ourselves from doing something where now we've ensured the future outcome. So essentially, when somebody has resistance around anything, and specifically here, we're talking about pricing, if somebody has resistance around raising their price from $300 to $400 an hour, and they say, if I raise to $400 an hour, I'm not going to get any sales, right?
Yeah.
At $400 an hour.
Yeah.
So therefore, I'm not going to do it. What they've just done is they've guaranteed that they're not going to get any sales at $400 an hour. Right. The only way to get sales at $400 an hour is to actually try it and run an experiment and see if it works. Yeah. And what's crazy is that I have never had somebody come back to me after I pushed them to raise their prices, because I really push hard on this. after I push somebody to raise their prices, I have never had somebody come back to me and say, I raised my prices and I stopped selling. And I will tell you that 90% of the time, and again, it's not a scientific number, it's just my gut of like almost all the time, right? That's 90% is almost all the time, right? Almost all the time, their sales are not impacted in a negative way at all.
Yeah.
And so they're serving the same amount of clients, they're making the same amount of sales, their close rate hasn't changed, and they're charging more for it. And all of a sudden they turn around and they're like $50,000, $100,000, $200,000 more in the bank at the end of 12 months than they had the last 12 months. And I look like a genius, but the reality is that they're the ones who did it. But it's acting on faith that there's a certain dynamic. The reason that you have resistance around pricing is all about fear. And the reality is that the more you charge, the more likely you are to make the sale. It's a crazy phenomenon in professional services. But the reality is that people judge how good you are based on how much you're charging. So the cheaper that you are, the less valuable you are to them.
Yeah.
The more you charge, the more valuable you are. So why the heck would you not want to charge more? Why would you not want to be perceived as the best lawyer on the block? Because I have $100 an hour more than somebody else.
Yeah.
You know, it's crazy how much we get in our heads and not realize the reality of the situation. I'm going to share one anecdotal story to help really bring this point home. And then I'm sure that you have other things you wanted to talk about, so we can get off of the pricing train. But one of my coaching clients, running a successful law practice, I've been pushing her to raise her prices. And she started to get wooed by the big firm in town. They started to, they took her out to lunch. They wanted to start having a conversation. What would it look like if we brought you on board? And I had a conversation with her where we clarified that she really didn't want that as her future. And that wasn't on the table. And that was the end of that. But I turned around and I said, now, what do you think that they were going to bill you at when they brought you on board? How much were they going to charge an hour for you when you were working for them as the top attorney in this specific category?
Right.
And it was clear from that question that they were going to charge a lot more than she was charging for herself today. And if nothing else works, paint that what if scenario. What if the big firm down the block hired me and started billing me out to clients? What would they charge me? Charge their clients for my services?
Yeah.
And that will really help you bring it home, because 9 times out of 10, here I am with the same 90% number. I keep throwing that out. Most of the time, that number is significantly more than you've been willing to charge for yourself. And it's all based on this fear of what if somebody says no? And it's a good thing if somebody says no. It's a good thing if your close rate is 100%, you're not charging enough.
Right.
You got to get to the point where people are getting turned away because you're too expensive.
Yeah.
Because that's when you're going to attract the clients who truly value what you're worth. And that's when you're going to have the right set of clients. And that's when you're going to really enjoy your business. And that's when you're going to get really profitable. So pricing is such a big piece of this, and, can't stress it enough. But again, it's part of the planning process. It's part of the execution process, right? You need to see that that's the problem. You need to work the numbers out and see that as the solution. And then you need to implement that.
Yeah. And no, and honestly, I really like the direction that this show is taken. I'm probably going to even change the title. I'm probably going to put a note up at the front of the episode saying, hey, this is what we kind of started to talk about. This is what I planned on, but this is where it went, and I like it. And I had one thought, talking about it, especially for people who are still hesitant about raising their rates. Is that something that you could potentially A/B test, where it's like, hey, have a number, you stick with your standard pricing for some people, try charging a higher number to some people. Do you suggest that, or should you just go all in and just try the higher rate for everybody?
I will tell you, don't A/B test it. First of all, the A test you've been doing for the last 15 years, right? Like you just need the B. That's first of all. But second of all, how do you come to terms with your own ethics and your own morals to understand, how am I charging this person one price, this person another price, right? There's nothing wrong. There's nothing written in stone, right? So there's nothing wrong with raising your price. And then if after 3 months, after 90 days, you see this, I'm making 0 sales at this price point, you can then back down to the other price point, right?
Yeah.
So I would not A/B test it. I would just A test it, and I would just put it out there, change the pricing. I would go back to all of your existing clients, raise their prices. Hopefully you have in your contracts with them that you have the right to raise a price, and you give them the time frame necessary if you got a 60-day window or whatever. But I would send out the notification to all your clients that we're raising our prices. I would open the door to communication if they have a problem with it, and then have conversations with those clients. But I've been telling my coaching clients, forget a drastic raise. When was the last time you raised prices?
Yeah.
Prices get raised every day. The price of milk, the price of eggs, the price of gasoline. And we all know inflation is through the roof right now, 7%, 8%. If you look, the last time you raised prices, if it was 5 years ago, what did inflation do in the last 5 years? How much more expensive are things right now? You have done a poor job of keeping that going. You should be raising your prices annually just to keep up with the rate of increase that is happening in the world. But even if you can't wrap your head around charging a significantly amount more, that alone should be a 25% increase. So go increase your prices by 25%. Start there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, just doing the math on that, let's say you're charging, $500 for a service, you raise that by 25%. I'm not a math guy. That's what, 120.
That's going to make it 625.
625. Yeah. To your point, I don't know how many people are going to walk away over 625 versus 500.
Right. Yeah. That's exactly the point, right? With one of my coaching clients, where she was grappling with this increase in price. We were talking about a $50 an hour increase, and she was like, "Well, my biggest clients I'm concerned about," right? And I said, "Okay, your biggest clients, how many hours of work are they doing with you in a given year?" Right? Because they're your biggest client doesn't mean that it's that much, right? It's 100 hours. If it's 100 hours that they're doing with you in a year, or 200 hours, like let's say 100, right? $50 an hour times 100, that's another $5,000 that they're paying you. And let's say you were at 300 before, right? So they were paying you $30,000. Now it's going to cost them $35,000. It doesn't, it feels big to you, but to them, that's not going to make a difference.
Yeah.
And we get so caught up in this emotional attachment to the price and questioning our value, and are we really worth it? And it's also the other piece we didn't talk about in professional services specifically is it's part of the value equation when you want to grow your firm. When you bring on an associate, what are you going to charge for them? What are you going to bill them at? You're going to bill them at less than you're billing yourself at, because you may not, but you should. And the reason is because the goal is to try to push as much work to them as possible. Now, if a client comes to the door and there's 2 attorneys in the office, and one is the firm owner and one is an associate, which would they rather have representing them? The firm owner.
The firm owner.
So everybody's going to want you. You're not going to be able to push anybody to the associate. So you create a discount. Hey, if the associate is $300 an hour and I'm $400 an hour, right? But if your starting point for you is too low, now you can't make money on the associate you hired either. So raising your prices also prepares you for growth, because it gets you to the point where you are charging enough, creating enough cash from it, where you can now hire somebody, and you can also build them out appropriately, where you can make money on them as well. So there's so much attached to it. And yet at the same time, we get stuck in our crap, and we get in our own way, and we don't do it.
Yeah. And I wanted to back up, and this last point that I'll make, and then we'll wrap up here. We really do live in a culture, and I say this a lot, we live in a culture where people truly want to work with the experts. All right. And, we make this analogy a lot. Like, if you've got to have heart surgery, you're not going to go to your general practitioner. You're going to go seek out the best heart surgeon. Well, guess what? The best heart surgeon is probably also not the cheapest heart surgeon. And you're going into that expecting to pay a little bit extra for that. You're fine if your copay doesn't cover as much as it might somebody else, because you want that peace of mind that you're working with the expert. In the legal services, even, someone doing your taxes, whatever it is, that's high risk. A lot of times people want that peace of mind that they're working with the best. And so if your rates don't reflect that you're the best, people are not necessarily going to connect that to you.
Absolutely. 100% agree. Couldn't have said it better myself. And honestly, I think that the last thing that we need to leave everybody with is to understand your role as a business owner. Your role as a business owner is a scientist. What does a scientist do? A scientist runs thousands of experiments with changing one ingredient at a time.
Yep.
And each one of them fails. They fail. They just keep going. They keep going. They keep trying. And ultimately, at some point, they get their breakthrough discovery. And that something works. And now they've got the formula for success. And then they're on to testing the next thing. As a business owner, you're a scientist. Most of what you try is not going to work. Something that you try is going to work, but you have to keep trying, and you have to not look at every action you take as this is the thing I'm going to judge my success on. And if I fail, I'm done. I am hanging up my my sword. I'm done. I'm closing shop. We're all finished, right? The reality is that we spent a lot of time talking about pricing. It may or may not be the thing that fixes your business. It may not be the perfect solution for you. Try it.
Yeah.
Try it. And make sure that you try it for long enough and that you have enough data to be able to come to a proper conclusion that this indeed was the thing that didn't work. Often we'll try something, but then there's so much fear behind it that we're showing up with that fear in the sales conversation. And that's why it's not working. So you really need to get brutally honest with yourself and make sure that you've tried it for long enough. But honestly, it's just keep trying new things, because every time that you try and you do it, you execute on it, and then you don't get the results that you want, that's okay. You at least got the information that this wasn't the solution, and you can move on to the next thing. And if you don't do that, you're just going to be sitting there waiting for it to come to you. It ain't coming to you. It doesn't work that way.
Right. Yeah. So before we wrap up, I know that you have a big event that you put on for lawyers and law firms called the Law Firm Growth Summit. It's coming up here early May. Talk for a little bit about that and how people can learn more about this event.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know when this is being released, if we'll even have tickets for sale yet. So be very careful when you go to the page not to sign up to last year's event, because we still have last year's event up. But lawfirmgrowthsummit.com is the website, lawfirmgrowthsummit.com. This is the third time we're running the event. When I created the event, I wanted to create a format or a place for lawyers to be able to come and get 100% business education. No legal information is being provided. Most legal conferences, it's like 95% legal, and then there's one off the wall course about business management or practice management or something like that. We're the complete opposite. It is completely focused on growing your business. And every year we try something different with how we structure it. This coming event, we're going to have 3 tracks based on where you're at in your business. So we'll have a track for somebody who's just getting started. We'll have a track for somebody who's already well on their way and they're trying to, build their initial team. And then we'll have a track for somebody who's already successful and has other issues that they're dealing with. But we bring in speakers. We had 35 speakers at the last 2 events. We had over 2,300 law firm owners that registered for the event. It's a large event, and we've done a really good job using technology to create a community to allow people to interact with each other. We have the ability for you to meet with vendors. We have the ability for you to interact with other people. It's just a wonderful time. It's virtual for a reason, and it's not COVID. We started before COVID. We created it virtual to allow people to be able to attend without needing to invest in airfare and getting somewhere. I do think there's a place for in-person events, and I think that's something that's in the future for us as well, to create an in-person version of this. But for right now, the last two have been virtual and have been very well received, and we're going to be doing the next one virtual as well. It'll be the first week of May, so it's Tuesday through Thursday. It's a 3-day event. I don't have the dates in front of me, but I think it's something like May 2nd.
I think it's the 3rd through the 5th.
Yeah, something like that. So that's lawfirmgrowthsummit.com. The other thing exciting that I have is this new formula that I created, the Law Firm Growth Formula. I've encapsulated that into a really small crash course. So if somebody really wants to just dive in and get their feet wet to understand how it works and how to identify where in the formula they fit, and what, because it helps you figure out where to focus your activities. Then you want to go to thelawfirmgrowthformula.com. It is not a free opt-in. A lot of people give free opt-ins to build their email list. But it's $97. It's like really inexpensive. And the reason that I charge for it is very simply because I want you to have some level of commitment when you come in the door. I want you to just go through and watch the 4 videos, right? So, it's going to cost you $97 to get access to it, but honestly, it's going to change your life. And if you're an attorney out there, then come and watch it. Even if you're an accountant or other professional services, you're welcome to jump in and go through the crash course, because it's pretty much relevant to you as well. But it is very specific to the business of running a law firm. And what I've learned with working with clients, business is the same from one business to the next, but there's little nuances that can be different from one to the next. So, it encapsulates that for law firms. And then the last thing is, if you want to hear more from me, I invite you to come and listen to our podcast, Profit with Law, but definitely stay subscribed here. Listen to John. I mean, he's bringing awesome guests in here, right? I'm here, but
exactly.
He's, you've got a good show here, and keep the dial turned here, but definitely would love it if you check this out as well.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. And I will make sure that those URLs are in the show notes. That's going to do it. Moshe, I do have one final question for you. It's one we ask all of our guests here at the end. And that is, if you had one piece of advice for our listeners out there, what would it be?
So this is a question that I ask at the end of my interviews as well. And, it's for me, it's a tough one to answer, because it really depends where you are in your journey. Like, where do you fit on the framework, right? But the biggest piece of advice that I can give you is just to take action. So many people just sit on their laurels. They come up with good ideas, they don't act on them, and the good ideas leave, they forget about them. And at the end of the day, when, you can goal set, you can plan, but if it goes in a drawer and collects dust, you got nothing. If you don't plan and you just keep taking action, and the action is something that's going to keep moving you forward, ultimately you're going to hit on the success formula, even if you didn't do it the right way. So I think the key to success is taking action. So just get out there, just get your hands dirty, try new things, be willing to take defeat, and just rise back up and just keep going.
Awesome. Love it. That's going to do it for us this week. Continue to rate and review us. If you would like to help us out, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts. That would help us spread the show and get the word out, and help other people just like you to get just that extra insight and that other perspective that I think we all really do appreciate. So that's going to do it for this week. Moshe, thanks so much for taking some time.
Thank you for having me. Take care.
Thanks for listening. To learn more, go to spotlightbranding.com/center stage.